How do you become a consultant? For years, I thought that consulting was reserved for people with MBAs, a collection of tailored suits, and access to exclusive clubs. Well, it turns out I was wrong. Consulting isn't about those things, and it's not about being an all-knowing guru. It's about solving problems, adding value, and sometimes just knowing where to look. At this point in my career, I was curious. How do you become a consultant? I've been a permanent worker, though I got laid off last year, so I guess not so permanent. And I've been a contractor on a few occasions. In fact, I've got decades of experience, but I've never been a consultant. So I decided to learn everything I could about how to become a consultant. Firstly, by reading some recommended books, and then by talking to my consultant friend, Guy Thorpe. And now I'm going to share everything I've learned with you. So remember me when you're buying your first tailored suit. Firstly, I wanted to understand the main routes into the profession. And Guy offered his views.
There's lots of different ways that you can go about getting into consulting. There's the opportunity to join a big established consulting business to start with, which works really well if you're early in your career and you're looking for an opportunity for development and growth and take some of the learnings that come from a big organization of that what they can teach you. So there's some really good opportunities for people who are early in career to sort of jump into that space. You've got opportunities to go out on your own. So, you might be mid-career, you've decided that, you've through the process of maybe being retrenched or being redundant or something along those lines that you think, well, actually, let's give, being a solo consultant to go and see how that works. And then probably the third option is around, running your own consulting business. So rather than being on your own, how can you work with clients, but then have people around you on your team that you can work and consult with different groups as well. So to my mind, there's lots of different ways that you can get into consulting. And there's no sort of one best way. There's just different ways to go about it.
Based on those three routes, at this stage in my career, I'd be looking to leverage my experience and use that to solve problems for clients as a solo consultant. My expertise is in project management, which is what most of this channel's about. So if that's of interest to you, subscribe and you get to benefit from that expertise too. The importance of expertise exists no matter what your type of work is, and that's the first thing that you need to get clear on. What's the one thing that you're better at than most people you know? Maybe you're great at simplifying processes, managing projects, or creating successful social media strategies. Whatever it is, you need to identify it and own it. As the book How Clients Buy explains, clients often hire based on their perception of your expertise and your ability to address their problems effectively. Here's a tip if you get stuck on this part. Ask your friends, colleagues, or even your LinkedIn network what they think you're great at. Sometimes we're just a little too close to our own skills to see them clearly. If you're working, have you noticed that there's a task that you keep getting trusted to do because you're the only one able to do it right? Now that you know what you're good at, you need to figure out who actually needs that skill. And this is where a lot of aspiring consultants get stuck. They try to be everything for everyone.
One of the things when you initially start consulting is you're really keen to get as much work in the door as you possibly can. So you broaden your service offering as wide as you can possibly go. That's generally a mistake though, because then you just become known for everything rather than being really good at something. And so, for example, for yourself, you've got a really strong skill set within PMOs and you're known for that. You have a reputation for that. So your consulting service offering would be based around PMO service offerings. It could be, refreshing an existing ePMO or a PMO. It could be adding in new services to a PMO. It could be doing PMO maturity assessments, those sorts of things. What you wouldn't want to be doing is going off and saying, hey, I can do agile transformations. Because that's a whole different skill set and a different space that's required. You might possibly be able to do it, but it's not your core service offering. And so I think, it sounds a bit cliche, but niching down to what your core service offering is going to be and what you're good at is really important. So people will know you for that service. They know that you've got credibility in that space.
Those areas of expertise that I suggested a moment ago are great, but maybe we need to niche down a little bit more. Maybe you're great at simplifying banking customer service processes. Maybe you're great at managing multi-million-dollar projects in manufacturing. Maybe you've created some of the most successful social media strategies for charities. The more specific you are about your expertise, the easier it is for you to point to the value that you offer and to find your target clients. The goal here is not to be okay for a lot of businesses, it's to be absolutely perfect for a few. Now we need to find clients. So I asked Guy, how do we do this?
For me, I think, this was one of my biggest learnings as well, is that, when I first started consulting, I built a beautiful website, I was posting lots on LinkedIn, and then I expected the work to come rolling in. And when I started, it was just crickets. It was just quiet. Nothing was happening. And so there's a really big learning around, when you start to think about how you're going to acquire clients, it typically comes from three places. There's your reputation, so which is around, hey, I've been good at what I do. I'm known for this piece of work, and people know about me in that space. There is referrals. So that is from people that you've worked with will then talk to another client or will talk to a friend and say, hey, look, I know you're in the business for looking for some PMO help. Stuart's really good. You should give him a call. And then there's relationships, which is, you've got a whole range of relationships, both professionally and personally as well. So it might be your son's, in a soccer team, and you stand on the sidelines and you talk to a couple of dads, as the game's being played. Those relationships, again, can also sort of bear client work going forward as well. So typically, your work will come from one of those three places as you go forward. So it's saying which marketplace should I jump into, those sorts of things. If you're looking at the core of where your work will come from, it's those three things. And that's really about people, right? So it's a lot about relationships and networks, and the relationships that you have with people is going to be where your work is predominantly going to come from.
So, building relationships and networks and growing your credibility is really important. Getting to know your potential clients' problems and for them to learn about your ability to solve those problems is key. But now we're getting into that problem which presents wannabe consultants with their next challenge. How do you agree on the work to be done? And perhaps most importantly, how do you price it? Again, I asked Guy, who explained how to go about creating a statement of work and identifying the price.
What we typically do is we like to do a little bit of discovery phase with a client. So we'll come in and we'll do a couple of weeks working with that client to get a little bit of a better understanding of what's going on, where they're at, to make sure that we're actually solving the right problems. Particularly if it's a new client that we haven't worked for, you need to understand their culture, their way of working, and get a really good view of their problem set. If it's a client you've worked with in the past, and you've got an existing relationship there, then that might be a slightly shorter period of time for you to work that out. What we generally do is do that discovery. We then produce what we call a statement of work. And what we do is we outline typically the types of things that we would like to solve or resolve for them. And then we price that piece of work. And sometimes that statement of work can have a couple of iterations with the client. They say, yes, that's good, but actually we want to dial this up a little bit more. What we generally do is once we've got clear on the scope of that, we then go through and we break out the number of hours required to deliver each of those components. You'll have an hourly rate that will be your standard component, and then you price the number of hours against that, and you end up with your total budget for that piece of work. It's not too dissimilar how you run a project. You have a work breakdown structure, you break those components, and then you price them. It's exactly the same with consulting. You just need to be clear on how those hours stack up to the overall engagement cost.
My next area of worry was about the preparation needed before you even engage with a client, such as, do you need to have a company set up? Do you need to have legal documents and contracts on standby? Guy suggested the following steps for being ready to engage with clients.
So you'll want to work through having a standard set of terms and conditions in your statement of work. And it just covers off a range of different things that are important for you to be successful in the engagement, then also for the client to get value out of that process as well. Typically, there are a few steps to arrive at before you end up with the signed statement of work at the end of it, but you might be engaged in a procurement process. So you might be submitting against an RFP, for example, a request for proposal, where you've been asked to submit a proposal around how you would go about solving this problem. It might be an RFQ. It's the same deal. You need to then go through a process of submitting your quote for that piece of work. Depending on where you're at and which process you're following with the client, having a basic standard step to start with is probably pretty important. So start out with, I know for us personally, we have a PowerPoint presentation format and standard that we use that brings a semblance of professionalism, and it's on brand, and it works with how we are as a client, as a consulting business. We have a standard statement of work document that we use and we populate with the client's requirements in that as well. We have an engagement calculator, so we know how to work out the cost for the engagement each time. It's not inventing it in a different way as we work through it. And we have a rate card. We know what our client rate, so our consultant rates are, and how we can apply those to the engagement as well. So having those basic things in place is probably pretty important. I think depending where you're at and the amount of work you're getting, we also have business insurance. So we have public indemnity and private insurance as well. So we're protecting ourselves from that aspect. We also have accounting software. So as you start to scale up and you're getting more invoicing and it's becoming more complex, having a way to be able to manage your accounts, manage your tax implications and requirements is really important as well. Particularly if you're new to this, you don't want to arrive at the end of the financial year with a significant tax bill that you hadn't accounted for. So being clear on that business aspect around taking care of your insurance, your budgeting, and also then your tax implications as well is really important.
Once you're up and running and have your first client, it's time to scale strategically. Now that you've proven your value and you've gained a bit of experience, you need to refine your process. Document your workflows, build templates, and start charging what you're worth. Flawless Consulting emphasizes the importance of balancing client relationships while scaling. This means staying authentic and maintaining quality as you grow. Remember, scaling doesn't just mean taking on more clients. It could mean focusing on higher paying ones, creating digital products, or even taking on subcontractors. The goal isn't to work more, it's to work smarter. So I've discovered that becoming a consultant isn't some mystical journey reserved for the chosen few. It's a series of steps that anyone can follow. Steps that start with figuring out what you're good at and finding the people who need that skill. So what's stopping you? Start small, be consistent, and most importantly, keep going. But wait, what about me and my consulting aspirations? Well, so you watch my videos because you want to get better at managing projects, right? Well, here's something you may not know. I actually help organizations to do this for real. With almost 20 years of experience, I've worked across multiple industries, fixing PMOs, improving governance, and coaching teams to deliver actual results and not just good intentions. But would I work well with your team? Well, you've been watching me, and this, what you see right now, that's exactly who I am when I'm working with teams. My videos are your pre-screen, so if your organization could use a little help, pass my details on to your leadership. The link's in the description. Let's make things better, and I promise not to baffle your leadership with project jargon. Well, not too much.